Some of you are, of course, from Bihar or in Patna. Others too, or who reside in some other parts of the country of the world, are as much a part of this team as the rest. For all of them, I know for sure, to be at Patna is as good as Konkani. You are indeed overwhelmed when you start receiving initial responses to the conference invitation. It seems unfortunate that some invitees, in spite of their eagerness, could not finally make this on time. Friends, those of you who had some occasion to visit ADRI in this past might know that we have been participating at conference for a long time. One of the first ventures of the Institute was indeed to prepare a very exhaustive research plan entitled Understanding Bihar, which had the objective of creating and synthesizing the entire available information on Bihar from the early period to the very present. A thematic division of the points of inquiry as well as the periodization of history was already worked out in the plan. Although the ambitious plan project is still awaiting a sponsor, the exercise was not in vain. It has helped us realize that although Bihar has received considerable attention from social scientists from various parts of the world, our understanding of Bihar is still very limited. Not only there are many research gaps, but in many of the studies, economic constructs are only apparently sorted, failing as a group to identify and characterize clearly the social categories that correspond to the economic concepts. It was either or a starting of estimation of space in Bihar are our efforts in this direction. Further, if there is so neat that its delimitation, characterization, and analysis of the local interaction patterns with others is merely a matter of paying attention. In case of Bihar, this problem is obviously getting more difficult. For some would argue that our ability to characterize that identity does not necessarily mean that it is not there. But either case, the task poses a serious research agenda, which has attracted obviously have a clear advantage in capturing realities and avoiding questionable aggregations. It also means that the results of some of these studies are more usable by development agencies. But in their eagerness to respect social specificities, this concept of provoking fresh initiative was in indifference or even rejection. This conference was planned by us to move away from this trend and to propose less rigid boundaries for the study of Bihar, where the global and the local exist for the virtual. I feel very elated that this perspective of ours on regional studies on Bihar have been appreciated by all of us. Most of the papers in this conference are indeed a continuation of the author's earlier studies on Bihar in a redrawn framework where global factor is free of explicitity. The conference, as is normally nowadays done, will end with a discussion on the preparing a research agenda on the future studies on Bihar. And this, I think, is very necessary because this conference that we are having here is in the beginning of this stage of the global influence of research. I do not want to explain how papers have come and most of them is coming with the presentation. And with these words, I welcome you all again to this conference. among us. Thank you. Now, Professor Arvind and last will be 3 minutes.
Dr. Arvind Das, Dr. Ghosh, friends and colleagues, it is indeed a great matter of great pleasure for me to be here this morning to participate in this very important seminar on Bihar in the world and the world in Bihar. The caption is so captivating that many people would like to know more about Bihar, and a society is a whole, it is an integrated whole, and you can't consider the parts only because the parts themselves are not autonomous, and therefore this attempt to understand Bihar in its entirety through this interdisciplinary seminar is extremely welcome. Bihar has gained a bad name in recent years. It has become almost a byword for backwardness. People always cite examples of poverty in the midst of plenty, and they bring in Bihar as a case history. Sometimes commentators have written that it is only non-Biharis who can save Bihar, and Biharis should be saved, Bihar should be saved from Biharis. That matter also needs a consideration. Some people have worked on the theme that Bihar has been an external current, and they have tried to make a strong case for it. The neglect of the central government, both during British days and during independent India. The image that is drawn of Bihar in the media, in print media, books, and whatever is rather unfavorable. And it is indeed a matter of great worry that this is continuing to be so to Canada. But I still remember Bihar and talk to me about Bihar, what is happening. The second example I will give you is about a guest from Mauritius, a very important personality there, Sarita Basu, who met me when I was at the Institute. And she began talking to me in Bhojpuri, because Bhojpuri still continues to be her mother tongue. But the Bhojpuri she spoke was quick Bhojpuri, which I could not understand very clearly. Only the words were there, the constructions, the sentences. She was proud that she was speaking Bhojpuri, and she had a recording of the talk that she had with me. At another time, only last year, I met a gentleman from Netherlands. He is heading a very important funding organization for NGOs, and he had some partner. Some people took me to him, and he was again proud to be a man from Bhojpur. He came from Suriname, and he had a funding organization for Emos, meaning Indian. So, Biharis are there, almost ubiquitous. They are found in many parts of the globe, and they are all doing very well in this way. Now, I told that when we were discussing Bihar in the earlier seminars, the themes were largely cut up into various sectors: agriculture sector, animal and husbandry sector, cooperative sector, industry sector, and so on. But the people of Bihar, and Bihar as such was missed. We were only thinking in terms of these activities which themselves were connected, but the interconnectedness never came up in the seminar. The themes that we have chosen for this seminar are indeed all-inclusive. For example, we are going to study the flow of people and goods in this state, and we find that people from different separately, and the causes of this differential development have to be studied. When we come to the question of identities, Dr. Ghosh also mentioned earlier, and it has also been discussed earlier. Some people doubt that the Biharis have an identity of their own, and sometimes feel that Bihar is a geographical entity only. There is no Bihari culture as such, and there are only subcultures: the Bhojpuri, the Maghi, Maithili, and the tribals. I however feel that there is a kind of Bihari culture which can be, with some effort, delineated in very clear terms. The question of identity is very important, but the question of identity is not a simple thing. Every person has multiple identities, and there is a hierarchy of identities. It is always contextual and situational. Which identity you emphasize at a particular point of time depends upon the context and situation in which you are placed. Now, besides the identities, we are also going to study the political situation, the decline in the state as such, the decay of the political institutions, legislative, executive, and even judicial. We find there is some decay. But here, we must be very careful that this decay is not only in Bihar. Many things that we are considering are all India phenomena, some even all world phenomena. In Bihar, they might be more aggravated. And since we are near to Bihar, they might look more aggravated. Then, if you go to other states and talk to people there, they will raise similar questions about their own state. Now the question of globalization, which is very extremely important, and that is the world in Bihar. That is almost half the concern of the seminar. It is much more so in the tribal areas, which were very peaceful, which were largely agricultural. But now, with new technology coming in, the tribal people have been catapulted from a very simple society to a very complex society. In the place, in this space where you could only hear the chirps of birds, you now hear the clang of steel. How it is coming, how it is affecting the life of the people, how it is affecting their psyche, that is extremely important. And in that connection, we are also studying sustainable development. We find that in our rural society, in our tribal society, we have a lot of native knowledge, traditional knowledge, which needs to be preserved and which can be used even for sustainable at the present day. That has And in this entire task,
it's not because civilization is 5,000 years old. Had a continuous urban culture, very for 2,500 years, which civilization whose geographical size very short the name. Started studying geography, class 3 of school is about the same as France. Bihar is about the same size as France. The population is roughly the same size as that of Germany. Both Germanies combined. So we're talking of an entity which is large, which is old, which is spread out in many ways. But we are also doing it in a context which is always fraught with situations, actions of different sorts take place which make us feel not only humble but also extremely sad and hopefully angry. I refer in the present context to the mass killing of nearly 70 people only a few kilometers away from here. And it has become such a routine thing in Bihar that about 3,000 people get killed over a year, 750 was the figure in the 80s, now it's gone up nearly 3,000. And yet the state goes on. If such a large subsequently in the 1977 onwards, you have the politics of coalitional governments. You had in the 1970s, Professor Rangan referred to the protest movement of the led by Yabaraj, which changed the government not only here but also in the center. And we had a very sustained present activism in the state, which has been very much obvious, and therefore it has attracted researchers from different fields to look at it. Poverty similarly has been very much very sharp focus in Bihar. It is not that the poverty here is significantly different from poverty in other parts of the country. It cannot be all poverty in Chile. But here it has stood out more. That has attracted a large number of researchers and other social phenomena, whether in terms of traditional categories of caste, kinship, rituals, etc., have also been studied in great depth. A very large amount of research has been done on the tribes, so-called tribes in the Jharkhand region, which from early anthropology right up to present day has attracted great interest and research. So these are phenomena which are present in the rest of the world too. But because they stand out so sharply in Bihar, researchers and academics have been attracted to study the state in great deal of depth. However, much of the research which has appeared in the state has nevertheless tended to look at the state, at various aspects of the state, very reasons for this. And I'll come to some of these reasons that I understand them in due course. This paper which has been circulated in the about individualized account, my own understanding of the different aspects, try favored, which is a transition from modernity to post-modernity. And the attempt to understand the world is the process is a cyclical process rather than a linear process. And I see that post-modernity and pre-modernity can coexist, and supplement each other in absolutely trouble-free way. I'll come to some examples of this. One instance which I would like to cite straight away refers to the whole idea that in Bihar, there has been no development of industrial capital. There has been a fairly large history of mercantile capital in Bihar, right from the time of the Buddha in 2000, in 500 BC. From that time, right up to the coming of the British, and there has been some degree of industrialization on the basis of mercantile activity. But in actual fact and in any significant scale, industrial capital did not develop in India. On the other hand, there has been an enormous development of finance capital. So you have capital jumping a scale, as it were, in Bihar, from mercantile capital usually and money lending, from that or trade, from that straight away to finance capital, where you have para-banking companies, or for that matter you have regular banks collecting huge amounts of money from the state and using it for various purposes, mostly outside. Now, this disturbs the patterns of political economy that we have been taught and which we have believed in. Because according to appears to suggest to me that it does not follow that given pattern. Similarly, when you look at other phenomena, several stages seem to have been skipped in the process of evolution of the state. Stages of conceptualization which have been accepted there. There is famous saying of us that socialism is not inevitable. That there is always an alternative to socialism, which is others. Now in Bihar, it appears that both exist simultaneously. The possibility of socialism and the reality of organism exist simultaneously. They are not alternatives. And there appears to be kind of a stable equilibrium between these two at the present moment. I don't need to give examples of this to this audience. But again, in this respect, the alternatives become complementarity. In terms of the state's resources and state's potential, there is an aspect which I would like to highlight, which I don't think has received as much attention as it ought to, which is has been referred to creation of a situation where, despite immense natural resources, because of particular operations of capital, the natural resources become valueless and the countries get into a situation of subsistence or even below subsistence, where famine, pestilence, death becomes the normal mode of existence. So we are holding the take the integrity involved in one of the natural resources which are immense, or land. These are resources which are enormous. These are resources which are in this stage. They have been realized that there are no other resources actually there anymore. So not only is the social ecology is tampered with, but a situation has been created where a very extremely vital resource has gone altogether. Let's look at minerals. More and more as we look at minerals, we find that the idea that we always had, that Bihar is immensely rich because it has immense amount of minerals, is a false idea. It was true in history that it was because of the existence of minerals in this region, after region in particular, that this state was able to create huge surpluses and build a several civilizations. But the value of those minerals is being reduced enormously. In many cases, because of plain, stupid human action, for instance, bad mining, for instance, the fact that coal is burning for 100 years, more than 100 years in the area of out from the copper age and the iron age into some other age. And therefore the value of copper and iron in particular is being reduced, and countries or situations around the world which have been dependent on copper and iron will necessarily have been the forced export of labor to Assam, to other parts of the country, but also to Fiji, Suriname, Mauritius and South Africa. There has been an exploitation of resources from this state. Even after independence, the balance was not redressed, and certain deliberate policies were adopted by the central government, to which I am sorry to say that we have political establishment in the bureaucracy did not respond in even professional terms, like trade equalization. The state has been discriminated against. But then the state has also made stupid errors in terms of policy, in terms of policy formulation. For instance, on the issue of coal royalty, by impleading itself in a case by Valley versus the state of Tamil Nadu, the state lost at least 900 crores a year. These have been, at best they can be called errors of judgment, but there is probably worse reasons for that, for the kind of perpetuation of the internal party taking place. The fact, I believe, is that since independence, the Bihari elite did not want to fight the center. It would rather join what became the center than resist. Unlike the elite in other parts of the country, whether it's Tamil Nadu or Bengal or Maharashtra or Punjab, where again there might not have been a clear-cut regional identity or state identity, but nevertheless, for whatever reason, the elites of those regions put up greater resistance. Was this because Bihar could not see it as a part of India which was not central to India? Is this a result of the historical legacy? Because the fact is that for the last 2,500 years, barring the last 200 years, Bihar was the center of India. And therefore, if you have that experience of nearly 2,000 years, is it that you internalize it so much that you continue to see yourself as the center even after you become the periphery? In a sense, is it a case, let's say, of Britain as part of the Commonwealth, where Britain sees itself as the center of the Commonwealth even though it has become the periphery? And is it therefore a situation which has happened like that in Bihar, where the leadership of Bihar, the political and the economic and the social elite, has seen itself as the part of the Indian elite, assuming of course that Bihar is India? I asked some questions on that, I don't have the answers. On the issue of the culture of poverty and the poverty of culture, it is easy to explain the lack of the development of a classical tradition. Perhaps because Bihar did not have the kind of pluralism from above, which had patronized such culture in other parts of the country. It did not have the kind of development of Arab traditions which occurred in Guwahati or in Haryana or Kuwait. It had, however, a fairly large and stable pluralism from below, which was then elected and exploited it, but which had been used for high culture. And therefore, the culture which developed in Bihar was a kind of a mix between a folk tradition and a kind of an imitative high culture. And as soon as whatever we make them to the high culture is okay, let's say the Tamil evolution, the music tradition are finished. So whether it is Rana or Kupas or whether it is those traditions are too away. And the folk traditions on the other side have also got tolerance. Reasons for that are many. One of the reasons, of course, is the and foremost the culture of the people, and then the culture of television and the other kinds of mass culture which come. The elements of this culture, this culture, this Commodore and Bangla culture which obtains in different parts of the world, which is most striking, is of course ratified. Because this culture is premised on the depiction and the enjoyment and the enactment of violence. So once again, violence becomes the modes of expression. And these modes of expression spread both in the urban areas as well as in the rural areas. So there is another dichotomy which I would like to contest here. There is a dichotomy around the world that over a period of time, rural areas transform themselves into urban centers. And urbanity and civic sense and urban cultures develop which are different from rural cultures in terms of habitation, in terms of charity systems, in terms of neighborhood concepts and so on. This is an reality which has been accepted around the world. In the case of Bihar, I find that this is certainly not happening. Because in Bihar, you start 2,200, 2,300 years ago with a fairly developed urban culture. Let's say Patna, but also in other cities. But then, fairly soon after that, you have the decay of those cities. And you have miserable villages having taken place there. So Sharma has said in his study. But then you have cities coming up again as joint ventures, which are based on the production patterns of the village rather than production patterns of the city. So as I said, when mercantilism takes to trade and becomes some degree of production to the market, you have some change taking place. So the change which takes place is still within the realm of the village habitat. So that you have Patna producing cloth in the 16th century for export to Lahore, huge amount of cloth, but all the cloth is produced in village life more or less. And the city developed with a population of around 1.5 lakh already in the 16th century. But the city is just a village. And the expansion of that village into the large village that Patna is today is premised on this process, where capital skips a stage in Bihar. The industrial stage is hardly ever reached. And when industry is created and it creates urban centers like, let's say, HEC, Ranchi or Bokaro or Tata Nagar, then those are exceptions rather than the rule of urbanity in the state. Therefore, civic consciousness is not a phenomenon in Bihar at all. And it is something which ought not even to be looked for. I think it is a mirage which sociologists have got caught by. Now, if you do not have city, when you do not have urbanity, you don't have civic sense, then can you have a civilization? Because etymologically, civilization takes from civitas. Now, which leads on to the question of what is civilization and what is identity in the case of Bihar. The P.P. Ghosh already said that there is a difficulty about defining a Bihari identity, and Mr. Sajjan also referred to the difficulty. The fact is, however, as again Mr. Sajjan said, that in spite of this ambiguity about what defines what constitutes Bihar, there is a kind of a Bihari identity. And much of this Bihari identity is in fact externally initiated rather than internally. It is vis-a-vis others that Biharis are defined. And the others define Biharis rather than Biharis define themselves. So, whether it is in Bombay in the 1930s, when Biharis were started being called Bhaiyas, or in Calcutta, where they were defined as Kotas, or in Punjab now, they were called Bihar, etc. It is the outside world which defines a set of people as Biharis, and then that identity is internalized to a certain extent and brought back here, and when it comes back here, it is further augmented. It is this passive and negative way of identity creation which is affecting Bihar, rather than active and proactive and positive way of creating an identity. But nevertheless, an identity of Bihari is created, and even the people who are involved with the demand for structure and who hopefully will get started sometime are brought within this identity of Bihari rather than category as an they have the double burden of two negative identities. But then overall, the fact again is that Bihar has, within Bihar itself, there are three distinct geographical, political, economic regions, and these three distinct political, economic regions have sub-identities which are very obvious in respect of each other. There is the North Bihar plains, which has one type of a social ecology and political economy. There is the Central Bihar plains, which have another type of social ecology and political economy, and then there is the plateau region, which has a third type. What is it that keeps all this together? It has kept together for a very long period of history, and therefore should have some kind of an explanation why it is that roughly the shape and size of Bihar has been more or less the same for about 2000 years. Short periods of time it has lost that shape, but it was only for short periods of time. But by and large, this region has been in more or less the same shape. This is a question which I would like to go to the seminar. I don't have an answer for this, but I suspect that the answers have to be found in disciplines other than economics as questions. The most important. And the presence of Bihar has defined the political economy of this region as well as the culture of the region in many ways. Now, one of the most interesting data that I have come across in the last few years is that Bihar has an agricultural growth rate of 3.5% per annum, which makes it the second highest growth rate in West Bengal at the present moment, because West Bengal, after having done Operation Varga and carried out some degree of land reform and provided agricultural credit and inputs to farmers, has got a growth rate of about 5%. Bihar has neither done Operation Varga nor does it intend to do Operation Varga or any such land reform thing. It has provided no agricultural inputs as a state. It has provided no agricultural inputs to farmers or peasants. It has no infrastructure of agricultural extension worth the name. And nevertheless, the growth rate is 3.5%. Now, what does one attribute that to? I would put three. Neither the processes of the development of capitalism nor that of the formation of the working class, the class in opposition to capitalism, has been completed in Bihar. This is not to say that at any point of time the process can be declared to have been completed and capitalism is handled like a ripe fruit waiting for mere gravity to make it fall down through the operation of a law of nature. Indeed, it contains the elements leading it to putrefy right from its inception, and yet it requires more than mere natural determinism to cause its downfall. On the other hand, the working class too can never be said to have been fully formed itself, for just as it does so and becomes able to abolish capitalism, it abolishes itself as a working class. As it may, in the specific the situation is far from reaching that stage. In terms of rural transformation, growth of capitalism and class formation, Bihar has witnessed a very uneven, non-linear and even confusing process unfolding over time. With the advent of the capitalist colonialist British Raj, while Bihar saw the expansion of trade and commerce, the beginnings of some modern manufacturing and the growth of an urban middle class and rural urban working class, it was also plunged into a new type of backwardness and underdevelopment. For long, it suffered from the exploitation and oppression which went on with the Raj and its permanent settlement with Zamindar. Bihar got very little of the mitigating benefits which were available to the noting and politics. Some of it. The village-driven zamindars are modern landlord capitalists. Other areas of investment of feudal wealth in Bihar have been in transport, entertainment, small arms trade and smuggling. There has also been a great spurt in construction activity similar to what was described in the Italian context as the petrification of wealth. Except that in Italy it was made, the petrification took place through the medium of marble, and in Bihar it takes place through the medium of substandard bricks. Counterpart to these developments, there also grew politics from below. In the first instance, it took the shape of spontaneous, sporadic, localized outbursts against oppression and exploitation. Then caste associations advocating social reforms and political resistance arose among the neighboring poor. Faced with intensified oppression, the fragmented resistance started coming together, and the result was not only an aggregation of various small attempts, but a movement which was and is qualitatively beyond the fragment. The neighboring poor have started forming into working class with components which are from different tribes and castes, expressed and age groups, rural and urban, organized and unorganized. The battle lines were drawn by the exploiters who grouped themselves into attacking armies, as in the case of the Ranbir. But the very act of drawing the battle lines are forcing the neighboring poor to also self-consciously organize, translating the already existing organic linkages among them into organizational formations to constitute themselves into a class in itself, and perhaps even a class for itself. But the process of class formation is not entirely spontaneous. It is also a self-conscious and deliberate process of the working class itself. In this sense, it is not so much class formation as class fulfillment. It is this process which is taking place in Bihar. I would like to conclude at this stage by just saying one thing. One phenomenon which has not occurred in Bihar, but which needs investigation, the reasons why it has not occurred, is to the ultimate aim of the Enlightenment, which is of placing the individual as an autonomous entity in relationship with other individuals. In Bihar, the individual does not have any meaning whatsoever. It is social groups, castes, or other groups which have much more significance. And I wonder why the individual has not acquired the significance which she has acquired in other parts of the world. It would be very satisfying to find out why this has not happened. And if only this happens, then the processes of equality that we talk about, because the equality cannot be brought about between castes, the equality has to be brought about, if at all, between individuals. And then the whole agenda will turn not only from an agenda of research to an agenda, but to an agenda of social change. Thank you very much.
By welcoming everybody, I think many people have been taken notice at the last moment, and I know that many people have come from abroad just by giving notice just 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago. Though I was in contact with them for the last couple of, I think 2 years ago, I started inviting people, but still I know that many people have not been informed until a very short time. So I'm very happy that so many people have been able to come over here, and I really like to express my thanks for that, first of all. I also like to thank Dr. Satinana, who is also has been, I think, given notice at a quite late stage, and still has been able to present a wonderful speech, and I thank him very much for that. Of course, I'd like to thank Dr. Arvind Das, who is actually not well. He's not feeling well at all, but still has been able to have a big paper which he will be able to read afterwards, I think, and not at this moment. But he is not only presenting his paper, he is also one of the organizers. And what he does, I think it's very difficult to combine. I thank you very much for that. I also like to thank Dr. P.P. Goos, who has been involved in many other activities since the last 1 year. Basically, he has been involved in activities of the SRT, and his ADRI is very much involved with State Resource Center for the literacy campaign. So his tasks were very much, and he was very much burdened, but still has been able to look after the national participants. And I had the honor like to look after the international participants who have been able to come over here. And I'm very grateful to all of them that you have been able to come. I of course like the authorities of Rome, to thank the authorities of Rome, because I think it's really excellent site to hold a conference, though there are some logistic problems because people have to communicate and commune between the ADRI office as well as Partner City and here. So there are some logistic problems, but I still think that it would be very nice to have the conference here, and during the next 2 days I think that will prove to be very successful. I like, of course, to thank ESF, European Science Foundation, for it has the main headquarters in France, but as Dr. Arpendag has continuously pointed out, it is not only France, it is an organization which is based in many other countries in Europe, but they have been provided part of the money which we needed to have this conference. Thank all the members in ADRI. Everybody has been helping since the last 2 years that we have started to think about the conference like that, like this, and that is going to happen finally, and I really hope it will be successful. If you actually, I don't think it's really necessary to read out the program. Everybody of you have got the bag in which the program is included, and as far as I think more or less we will keep to that program, we will stick to that program, but unexpected people might still turn up, so there might be some more addings, and there might be 1 or 2 persons who won't be able to present a paper. I think Ms. Bela Bakia hasn't arrived yet. She was really scheduled to arrive today. I don't know if she will be able to make it. Her paper was scheduled on tomorrow in the morning session. I really hope she still will be able to. There's one adding already now. One adding is there on the 4th day in the morning session on the last day. Has been able to come out from Hyderabad, and I thank you very much that you have been able to come out to last month. Actually, if you see communities that have been studied by different people from different disciplines in different ways, and that's actually what is shown by the papers which came in. They can't be really brought into coherent sessions. And I think that is extremely difficult for the chairpersons, those who have been made chairpersons. They will have a very difficult task to try to unite them, but I think that might not be even the goal of this seminar. I think it might be very good to point out that Bihar is really not a static, and what already has been done. Please speakers, it's not a static state. It's an extremely dynamic state, and that really is shown in the papers which we have already received. So more addings are there. We also will have photo exhibition, which is not stated in the program, but there will be a photo exhibition on Bihar. And besides that, what is already included in the program, we have some documentaries by people on Bihar. And so it shows already that there are not only academicians presenting their work on and in Bihar, who have been working on and in Bihar, but also those who are actually outside the mainstream academical circle. They are journalists also. There are few people who are actually not belonging to any kind of academic institution. They are photographers, etc. Who also will show what is Bihar in their view and what are the past developments, the present situation, and what is the future. As you can make out, we have everyday dinner, which will be hosted already, I have said, by different ranks, as well as by ADRI. On the last day, we will be having dinner in ADRI premises, and there will be a cultural program. And all of you are very much invited to attend the dinner as well as the cultural function on all the days. abroad since the last 2 years who had these seminars, and I think this is shared by Dr. Organised, and I think
there has been suggestions from the house that some of the
thank you, Dr. Gupta. Let me take just a moment, if I may, to thank Dr. Gupta for that warm and generous introduction, and to congratulate and thank the organizers of this conference as the first presenter in the technical session, and following on the comments of my friend Dr. Nand and Organised, I think it's appropriate to say on behalf of all of us who are here that we are greatly indebted to all of you who are the organizers of this symposium. I must mention the names, obviously, of Organised, of Dr. Puti Ghosh, of Kristina Krikov, of Sabal Gupta, of Sunita, and I'm sure many others whose creative idea and organizational skills are so clearly come to fruition in our meeting this week. Conferences and symposia have the obvious and normal purpose of engaging in serious intellectual inquiry meant to reveal new insights and new truths about the subject at hand. The present case is additional, if somewhat onerous and unfortunate responsibility, which I've been referred to, of retrieving Bihar from the trash bin of the popular imagination. I will touch on this problem only indirectly in my comments, but let me say here simply that it is significantly Organised as a professional historian and sensitive publicist of the print and visual media who have done so much to repair the skewed images of Bihar, as he did, I thought, superbly well this morning, as a place and a people with a history of human experience no less central to the idea of India than any other place on the subcontinent. As observers of this social and cultural space, Arvind, we're indebted to you for the wisdom and sensitivity you have brought to the realistic portrayal of the tragedy and potential of this remarkable state. I told a prominent academic friend in Delhi who had invited my colleague from the University of Virginia, President Dana, and I to have lunch with you today, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm going to be in Bihar for a conference on Bihar. He said, oh, that's very interesting. What are you going to say? What I said I was going to say was that the people who live in this place are human beings just like all the rest of us, whether in India or any place else on the planet. And my friend said, oh, my wife will be pleased to hear that. Our daughter has just been married in Bihar. And I said, I'm very pleased. I won't go much beyond that in terms of explaining what the Delhi perception and what the many other perceptions are. We're not concerned with that here, though I am going to address the general and larger issue. And before I do that, however, I'm going to pick up on Arvind's touching and sensitive observation about the citizens of India who died in Lakshmanpur Bhat, as I was taking this paper to be printed. And I say the postscript, which is on page 44 of my text, but which is on page 27 of yours. And with your permission, I'm going to read from my printout rather than from the version you have, simply because I've marked this for a shorter presentation than it would take to read the whole thing. I say in the postscript that as this essay was being ready for printing on December 2nd, reports reached Delhi of the brutal massacre of at least 75 Dalit agricultural laborers in the village of Lakshmanpur Bhat in Jalandhar district of Central Bihar. For those of you who are unfamiliar, from those families the deaths occurred. The village is situated on the throne, across from Dunlop-Inca, notorious for an earlier episode of mayhem and murder perpetrated against untouchable voters in the assembly election of 1990. The victims of Dunlop were, including at least 15 children and 27 women, which was what the people were on the day that I was writing this, were murdered in the dead of night on December 1 by upwards of 300 killers from the Gandhi Asena and Lemurani allegedly outlawed in November 1995. The victims were all specifically targeted supporters of the PGINL. In the killing fields of Bihar, the circumstances of the victims, the killers, and the political response are not unfamiliar. What is new are the numbers and the apparently growing power and influence of the Gandhi Asena. But in terms of the focus of the conference and the comments that Dr. Kathir made, I think that's relevant. And secondly, how the political events of the 1990s in India stand up next to those 3 decades preceding the achievement of freedom. There are obviously other kinds of comparisons that can be made. For purposes, the ones I've chosen can reveal much about the reality of Bihar in the then and now, and at the same time, political experience of this state in no way expected of the wider world will inhabit. Let me also say that my concern here with the civil sensibilities of the democratic quality that is India or the United States is today neither in any defensive or in any judgmental sense, but rather to provide a wider perspective and a deeper understanding of the political experience of India and freedom movement have been among the more dramatic historical landmarks of the 20th century. It was, in fact, as early as 1918 that Max Weber, a German sociologist, was writing with much sociological insight about politics as a profession and observing on those who engaged in the effort for politics as opposed to those who lived off of politics. In the late 20th century, it's not a distinction difficult for us to understand between those who do politics for a cause as opposed to those who seek political power as a source of money or power for power's sake. My point then is simple and quite straightforward, namely that politics can be, and most often is, a mental business. Any place on the planet, and including those politics where democracy is the norm. To presume otherwise, I think is to delude ourselves. Having said this, however, the further point is not to presume for a moment that venality, corruption, opportunism, and self-interest are therefore somehow acceptable behavior, but rather to see such behavior as a political challenge to honest people acting honestly and realistically, I add, to retrieve the system in the larger interest of the public good. While such a generalization may appear to be no more than a gratuitous platitude, it does permit us to contextualize what is happening in India and Bihar, as Dr. Sachin suggested, and as I'm suggesting, in the larger framework of human democratic experience and in the struggle for freedom of the nation and people in this century. I will proceed in the printed version of the paper to compare India and the United States as something I have warned my students at the University of Virginia for 35 years, my undergraduate students, my DA students, never ever to do. The problem, of course, is the common one. They wanted, young American students in their late teens and early 20s, they wanted to know why India was not like Charlottesville, Virginia, or Washington, D.C., or someplace else. Identified a miscounting of the number of voters, surprise, and so on and so on. I also comment, given what has happened in this state and in this city in recent months, I comment on the fact that on September the 3rd, Governor J. Clyde Simonson, the governor of Arizona, who had been indicted on 21 counts of criminal bank fraud, was in fact convicted on 7 of those counts. You having trouble hearing me? Trouble hearing me? Is that better? Yes. Fine, thank you. In any case, what's happened in Bihar in the last 4 months is not unique to Bihar. We say it's unique in India, and it may be, and I make comments about what I described in a piece that I published recently describing Bihar as being on the verge of structural collapse. I described the city of Washington, D.C. as being on the verge of structural collapse. I think the page to do that. I'm not going to talk about it here. I then talked about wife of the former chief minister of the state, becoming chief minister, and there was naturally a wide wringing of hands, especially in the valley. But I cite half a cases of same thing happening in American political history, and with different reference not only to husbands and wives and brothers and sons and daughters, but leading parents. Farooq Abdullah last week for a statement about his son Umar Farooq, who is 29 years old. I didn't see him in the newspaper, but nevertheless he said it. And so on and so on and so on. I'm going to then make some comments about what's been happening in the UP Legislative Assembly. I think you can say the first story, what's been happening. But the speaker of the UP Assembly made extended comments, as did Mr. Sandman, who made some comments, of course, about the local Sabah itself being spoken Charlie, he said, and continued disruption of the proceedings of the House, has breach of the resolution made on the Golden Jubilee session held on August 26th, September and September 1. As far as it concerns commitment to orderly conduct of business, it is also, Mr. Khanma said, a mindless mockery of the people who have returned this House and an appalling denigration of the very institution of Parliament we have not permitted. Please note his words. A mindless mockery of the people. It's a point that I think the general assumption obviously is that what happened luckily and probably near unique exception imposed in India, and that nothing remotely resembling such violent behavior could have possibly happened in the more ordered and orderly days of the freedom movement culture. My suggestion is that neither of these assumptions is entirely correct. While there well may be more corruption happening in 1997 than before in the United States and in India, I make a point about the fact that there's an explosion of media, print media, and visual media in this country and all over the planet. It's certainly the case that we're more aware of what is happening. There's much greater visibility of the fact of corruption, hence a greater awareness that it is happening, a greater concern with its meaning, and a greater support of the activism, whether judicial or political. We read so much about it in 1997, certainly a greater responsiveness to the issue at the ballot box, and I've argued sometime for the last 15 years or so, been watching Indian elections closely in this state, that the sensibilities of the voters on this issue are nowhere more sharply honed than they are in India. And I have said, I'm not going to skip to a discussion of the Supreme Court and so much for broader comparisons. I've made great comparisons between India and that for the rest of the world. I didn't talk about other places in the United States. I did a very nice essay about a year ago. We talked about political corruption as a worldwide phenomenon. Italy has put a fifth government in place since in the same 50 years that India has been at it. And I think India is coming to parliament with it as well. It works out to an average of over 4 years per, which is about what we do in the United States. I could examine that further, but never mind. If the differences between democratic polities are not dramatic in terms of the human foibles we as Americans and Indians bring to the process, I'm not suggesting that the same kind of argument can be made in comparing the India of 1997 with the India before 1947. And many reflections generated on the occasion of 50 years of political freedom, with rare exceptions, the very real achievements of the nation and its people in that half century have but rather the measure that is used in making comparison between what is or might have been in the political arena of the present with the reality of the political past. Essentially, what we are seeing is that the politics and the politicians of today are being compared with an idealized vision of the freedom fighters of yesterday, as though all political activists of the freedom decades of the 20s, 30s, and 40s were cut in the same mold as those towering figures who are rightly called the founders. The case is made most pointedly, for my purposes, by editorials appearing in two colors in India's leading newspapers, the Telegraph of October 3, 1997, and the Statesman of October 15, 1997. I'll quote everything. Referring to events in Patna and Delhi, the Telegraph editorial writer commented, these politicians do not bear comparison with the politicians at the time of independence. Quite apart from the question of stature, men and women generally entered politics then with a cause. We've heard that before. That was not confined to self-service. One has only to think of leaders such as B.R. Ambedkar, Abul Kalam Azad, Subhash Chandra Bose, Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, Rajendra Prasad, Chakravarti Kochari, not to speak of N.K. Gandhi, to realize the height from which we have fallen. The name of Jai Prakash is most often also added to this pantheon of founders. Munshi then, the writer then employs the Bavarian argument to reinforce his comparison of these giants of an earlier day who fought for cause with the present class of quote demagogues, power brokers, and scandal mongers who so very obviously live off politics by way of dishonest color and scandal. Fairness, but significantly, the writer does allow that those early leaders, quote, were men of independent economic means or a sense or simple means in their personal lives, by which I presume these referring to. I just want to make one, I'll just quote very, very briefly from the statement. The statement refers to all of the same names. Back then, as soon as the influence of Pandit Nehru and Vallabhbhai Patel and Maulana Azad ended with their lives, we were back to where we were before the Mahatma fashioned men out of common clay, taught the virtues of courage and sacrifice, and led by example that a life of service has its own rewards. And I will skip beyond that. Compare the political players of Patna, Lucknow, or Delhi in the 1990s with Rajendra Prasad, Jawaharlal, and Gandhi, and other giants of the freedom movement is no more reasonable than to compare Bill Clinton, Newt Gingrich, or the convicted governor of Arizona with Washington, Jefferson, and Adams of our own generation of Congress. To do so would be an intellectual and symbolic expression of the imagination focusing on, I think, historical credibility. It was, after all, Jawaharlal who reminded us that common clay was not an uncommon constituent of the human character before the achievement of freedom. Campaigning for the Indian National Congress in the general election of 1946, Jawaharlal charged that the black marketeers had thrived under the rod, and then he went on to suggest that what we can only presume was a rhetorical campaign flirt, that when his party, that is Congress, came to power, we would have hanged the black marketeers by the nearest lamppost. Obviously, in his speech, but you pick up my point, which is essentially that 1947 was not somehow a magical date before which and after which these images apply. As I keep saying, there's an element of truth in the high-sounding rhetoric that the Indian press has given us. But ultimately, we must concede that the giants of freedom, whether of those of 1947 or 1776, are the exceptional figures in human history. Most of us, to use a metaphor, are made of untransformed common clay, which I think the point I was making with my friend it is in understanding that fact and how to organize and mobilize human society's constitutive flawed men and women into reasonable instruments of government that we face our greatest challenge. And I think that one of the issues we are concerned with here today. Formulating ADRI solutions based on the sensibilities and achievements of a rare generation of founders is in the end not likely to be productive and endeavor. I will concern myself in the remainder of my remarks, as I go on 25 minutes, so 20 minutes more, with other examples from the experience of freedom decades, not to deny the nobility of the freedom fighters and of the founders, but to help understand their reality and the continuity between the then and the now as a basis for contextualizing and understanding the present. No place on the planet has the potential for moving in the direction of a civil governance of the highest order than does India. No one ever presumed that it would happen overnight, least of all the founders, when they envisioned India's tryst with the future. But it is in making the effort and the pain of the process that the achievement will ultimately be realized. And I've always thought that this is what Gandhiji meant by the means being more important than the end. In an audience like this, where I don't have to justify, following Arvind's concluding remarks, the importance of what I started doing literally in 1957 in this city. I pointed out to my colleague when we came by what is still called the Grand Hotel, where my family and I stayed for a few nights while that all was beginning. Some of you know that I am presently engaged in completing an edited translation of Adnan Saraswati's Never Jivan Samhaj, My Life Struggle, which was a memoir he wrote in the Hazaribagh Central Jail in 1941, and which was issued after his death by the ashram in 1952. I consider it to be one of the most important documents and one of the least known and understood documents within the movement. Well, without complaining to those of you who are unfamiliar, I simply want to say that Sajnand was intimately involved with the political history of the state and the nation in 1920 when he first met Gandhiji and was a member of the working committee of the Bihar Congress Committee, was a member of the All India Congress Committee. He was certainly not a major player at the Nehru and Gandhiji level, but he was very seriously in that rank of serious players in the politics of this country and certain politics of the state. So what I'm saying is that the extracts that I quote, and I'll read just only one or two of them, which has Sahajanand commenting very critically on the encounters he had in jail when he was imprisoned first in 1921 for a year, then in 1930 for a year at the time of the Salt Satyagraha, and then in 1942 for 2 years. 34 when he broke with Gandhiji, one of the most committed, to use his words, Gandhivad, the most committed Gandhians, his description of Gandhiji's speech at the Ahmedabad Congress is as powerful a description of the meaning of Gandhi in the political life of this nation that I've ever read in any language. I quote it not in this paper, but in an essay that appeared in the Historical Review in this issue. At the same time, he then broke with Gandhiji in 1934, having to do with agrarian issues in this state, and having to do with agrarian issues specifically in North Bihar of the state, and having to do with the effects of the earthquake of January 1934. The political meaning, I don't think, has very often been faced. Arvind is one of the few people who for us, the important point is that Shahjahan was there, and when he provides observations on the politics of the day, whether at an AICC meeting or during elections or while in jail, we're essentially giving a first-hand account of what was happening. As I say, he met Gandhi in 1920. He was absolutely absorbed in the effect that Gandhi was having on the movement, the freedom movement. I'll just quote one brief vignette about the Nagpur Congress, the first one he attended. I also witnessed saying that as a committed Gandhian in principle and practice, there was this breakdown between proclaimed belief on the one hand and the actions he observed around him on the other that most distressed Shahjahan. The growing escalation in his pain and anxiety was first with those who denied Gandhi's precepts and their actions, and then gradually with Gandhi himself for allowing it to happen, and then for the very idea of combining morality, religion, and politics in the arena of the freedom movement. And you say, look, Professor Hauser, that sounds like a paradox. Well, it is. And it is in that very rich paradox and ambiguity between this man, a man who took vows of sannyas in 1907, and a man who engaged in social reform, what some would describe again as a half-truth, partly untrue, of caste politics in the team, to someone who was a committed Gandhian, to someone who became the central figure in the mobilization of peasant interests, and let me say, as I have in print, not only at the level of the middle peasants, whom Arvind refers to, are now themselves land controllers in the state, but scheduled caste, landless, untouchable laborers. And I'll give a brief about that, and I don't need to go into that here. It was that there were doubts in Gandhi's own mind about the degree of commitment and achievement in his precept of truth value is, of course, well known. Witnesses withdrawing the non-cooperation and civil disobedience movements as he did. And those same doubts and anxieties, of course, were there in the minds of others as well, not least of all that of Representative Prashad, also from this state, north of the river, whose anxiety, especially with the un-Gandhian behavior of political prisoners, Shahjahan referred to again and again, and Representative Prashad did himself. It was, in fact, in the jail environment, common for most political activists during the freedom movement that Shahjahan found the breakdown of Gandhian principles most persistent. He returns again and again to the theme in his Metajivan memoir, from his first imprisonment in early 1922 at Gazipur, then to jails in Faizabad, Varanasi, Lucknow, and Hazaribagh. Most commonly, as Shahjahan reports, this involved harassing jail authorities, breaking jail rules wherever and whenever possible, demanding first-class treatment and high-quality food, and on at least one occasion in Faizabad, set the jail on fire on the occasion of Holi, which was time of celebration. In any event, because I'm running short of time, I'm not going to quote any of these Shahjahan reports. I've given you about 20 pages of them, and I was only going to read about 2 pages of them, but I don't want to run over that. And my point really is to say 2 things. Shahjahan's point is that he was in jail, both with people at the level of the founders, Rajendra Prasad, Sampurnanand, Jawaharlal, and many, many others, but he was in jail with lots of other people. And his point, as I say, is that the whole reason for being there was to move in the direction of what Gandhi was arguing, and Shahjahan felt that that was not happening, and it was not happening among a broad spectrum of political activists in UP, in the jails he was in UP and the jails that he was in this state, that he felt detracted from their potential to serve in the interest of the nation once he came, especially given the fact that, as he described, they were ignoring that argument does. It confirms the point that President made. And there's some wonderful, when Butman is talking about how the election happens, he talks about really rich vignettes, opposition parties trying to buy voters. It was an ad election, he said, with the song, but in the polling place, "We Will Change" became very popular. I mean, mind you, these are free translations, but when voters were compelled to go to the polling booth, he says, by the rival party against their wishes, they would be fed sweetmeats in an effort to influence their vote, but on entering the polling booth, they would vote for Congress. These episodes made a great impact and have become an important part of our history. Then he talks about the fact that in Jahanabad, the place where this Lakshmanpur murder happened, the Kisan Sabha was very, very strong, and as our friend from Osaka will tell us, Jagannath Sharma and Sahajanand and Kisan Sabha were very, very powerful in Jahanabad. And Sahajanand and Kisan Sabha were having trouble getting support for their candidates. In fact, they didn't get any, he says. I do not know whether after the results were declared that the eyes of Congress were opened. In Jahanabad, even a dog of the Kisan Sabha would have won in that election, he said. Well, in other constituencies, Congress spent thousands of rupees to fight elections, not 1 rupee was allocated to Jahanabad. This is another example of the high-handedness debate that we found in the victory. Let me just take 5 minutes. I have framed my argument in these pages around a celebratory event of India's freedom. The reflections, August 15, 1997, inspired. I began with Nagarjun's poet's question about the meaning of that freedom, and implied that because Nagarjun is a Bihari, it seemed that his reflections were a particular point of departure for our inquiry, certainly for my inquiry about Bihar in India and in the world. I went on then to cite my paper very briefly about politics for cause and politics for health and power, and to close that as students of India's social and political history, it might be well to examine those experiences in space and time as a device for separating the realities of human experience from an imagined ideal, that is politics for cause. I did this by suggesting that the self-interest and corruption are elements of the human condition, and not unique to Bihar in India, and I studied pieces of true in the United States. My larger argument, however, is to place the freedom movement ideal into the historical perspective of human experience within which it happened. I would suggest this kind of political sensibility is an Indo-Wide phenomenon. It reflects social and cultural and religious identities that have been at work in the electoral arena since well before 1947 and may be viewed by some as a downward slide in India's democratic political experience. On the other hand, it can also be viewed as seen as a realistic expression of the complex social, cultural, economic, and political pluralism that India has become over 50 years of adult franchise electoral politics. This kind of politics from the bottom up, as I call it, inevitably means a more open democratic system with more expectations and more demands. It is in short quintessentially Indian, okay, which accounts in part for the mystification of those observers born or Indian whose expectations are defined by what may be called the Westminster model or somebody else's model. The system is inevitably a time of transition because it is more plural and more open, more demand-oriented at the local and more intimate levels of experience. The assumption is sometimes made that it is that very openness, the 70 or 75 Indian citizens of Lakshmanpur in Jahanabad were not beneficiaries of those institutional structures. And the institutional structure has most significant is this document. It's called Constitution of India. I'm going to read the first sentence. It starts by saying, "We, the people of India." It talks about justice and equity, and that's the issue that one needs to deal with. And I suggest the voters of this state and this nation know that, whether they read this document or not. And I was going to address that question rather more directly with final comments about democracy. Finally, he said that no one needs to go to Congress and presume, as I said, that the road to freedom would be an easy one. It was not in the United States, where you will all recall we were detonating ourselves in a civil war more than 80 years after our freedom. And that trauma is to this day an element of how we define ourselves as a people. Freedom is an ongoing process for America as it is for England. I like to think that the resilience, the awareness and vigilance of people in both places will serve them well. I will conclude these remarks as I have others who in H.L. Mencken who reminded us that the cure for the ills of democracy is more democracy. Or on a more poignant and perhaps compelling note, to cite the Nobel laureate, the Dr. William Faulkner, explaining the public lecture at the University of Virginia shortly after I got there in 1962 and shortly before his death, when he was asked what he meant by the characters in his novels doing this or doing that. He said he was concerned in his writing to portray, quote, the travails of frail and fragile man. He too was concerned, as we all are, with the human being. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Walter, for the presentation. I think that's a good job. It will be worthwhile to point out a few salient features of Walter's presentation, and particularly to provide enough vision for a practical discussion. To me, it appears that what Walter has primarily strived is to put the political behavior in a historical perspective as well as an international perspective. I mean, by comparing the pre-47 political leaders' behavior and the contemporary behavior of the political class, one wants to draw some parallels. And secondly, he is also wants to put into a historical perspective the Indian freedom movement as a whole. And Walter suggests that the politics can be, and most often is a messy business. So this I hope will invite further comments. And he has further said that the politics for a cause, he has a suggestion that it may be an imaginary ideal. I mean, politics is more often for power and self-interest. So that is a general assumption which is implicit in this paper. Then another so far as the international perspective is concerned, he has brought out the examples from America. He has brought out the examples from other European and Latin American countries, and he wants to show it as an international phenomenon. And some of us may be being provoked to remind of Indira Gandhi's famous dictum that corruption is an international phenomenon, where she was justifying some misdeeds of her, but I do not suspect her any such motive, and he has taken pains to point out that he is not going to justify it by saying those things. And another point is about the concern about breakdown of civil sensibilities and the issue of corruption is now unprecedented. This is one of Walter's important observations in the recent months. In the last 18 months, here with the media, he has found these sensibilities, the civil sensibilities, the breakdown of these civil sensibilities and the issue of corruption that has created tremendous turmoil among the people. And he has quoted extensively from Sayanand to show the happening in the pre-47 Congress in particular. And I suspect that he has used Sayananda's words where he would not like to put his own words at this point of time. So that is another way of couching this. And of course, Walter asks us that the solution is not idealism in the past, rather he urges to return to the people and expresses his optimism by imposing his confidence on the electorate of India and the electorate of Bihar as well. And with that note of optimism, I think he ends this presentation. Now, so much for Walter's speech. I am not going into the points of Arvind because I have not myself noted the points. I think I leave it to the House to have a comment on Professor Satyanarayana's speech, on Arvind's paper as well as Walter's paper. The methodology can be either those who want to react or ask questions can send sheets of paper, or it can be done by raising his hands and we can, what time? So we can have half an hour for this discussion.
But to accept all the consensus presented by Arvind in his brilliant, exhaustive and well-presented paper. But I failed to agree on one point. That is, when he says that Bihar, so far as the mineral resources is concerned, there was a time when we call that Bihar is rich. It doesn't mean, it doesn't reflect the present Bihar. It reflects the past Bihar. I don't agree into this. Because so far as right you are, that so much exploitation, what we call non-utilization or misutilization, which you yourself have quoted, and it has been done, still Bihar is very much rich so far as the mineral resources are concerned. Take the example of, in spite of all the deforestation, if you go to and examine the Polham forest resources, the flora and fauna of that region is still rich, and I think it is richer in any part of the world, what we speak of any part of India. So in the case of mineral, in spite of the fact that coal areas are still burning inside Jharia mines, lot of areas are being there and coals are not exploited to the extent it should be exploited, still it is the best. In spite of the fact that what we call recently our copper mines has been closed because of certain reasons, but still the copper that was produced there and is still in the market, that is the best. So I try to understand to have prompted Dr. Bihar to say that when we call, yes, I say that when he says that so far as the mineral wealth is concerned, richness of mineral wealth is concerned, it is a thing of the past. I still believe, and I have a firm conviction with all the documents that I possess, that Bihar is poor so far as the other things are concerned, but Bihar is still rich so far as its mineral wealth is concerned. Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, I would like to react on Sadanand's inaugural address. That is about his cultural, what you call, connotation and reflection, which was later on also affirmed by Arvind Das in his paper. So diversification is there. But in spite of all these cultural associations, there is a unification in the culture, that is Bihari culture, so far as its appearance and all that, in the conduct and reflection is concerned, roughness, toughness, and what we call estate formality is the inner cultural own of what we call the footsteps and all that. But we are trying to present our disease, what we call this wind problem, which can be very valuable, which can have a very other variables. We are trying to present ourselves sharply that is in South Bihar, North Bihar. So, in spite of all these diversifications, we have got a culture, identity of Bihar, and that is not the North Bihar culture, that is not the Central Bihar culture, that is not the South Bihar culture, it is unification, it is entirely the culture of Bihar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. You have made your point. I ask for other speakers who would like to intervene or raise questions. And before I ask the next speaker on this, I request that one should take more than 3 or 4 minutes so that we can allow maximum number of persons.
While I share the optimism of Walter that democracy or democratic institutions will lead to freedom, I have sharp differences as far as the corruption, his parallels of corruption between US and India is concerned. Capital accumulation is being degenerated through qualitative changes that are taking place into a process where it is only the question of amassing wealth through corrupt practices. And also, the whole question of politics is simply boiling down to the mere caste war. And the caste equations are also changed. So the most important point is what are the qualitative changes that are taking place in the politics of Bihar. And these qualitative changes, whether this is good or for bad, the point is that the basis of underdevelopment of this state is that it is probably going towards worse. Why is it going towards worse? What are those qualitative changes? If you could probably focus light on this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, in all these papers or sources are pointing out only the institutional factors to be responsible for the backwardness of the Bihar economy. I think this is a serious shortcoming of the entire discussion. To me, it appears that it's the finance which is the most important thing. It's the flow of finance from East India to Europe, which made Europe rich and East India poor. That's the basic thing. Bihar in the East India was the richest portion of the entire world. And now it is the poorest region. It's a play of finance. And nobody speaks about finance. What's the reason there? I mean, if Bihar has become poor, it's because the policy is adopted by the government. British government at the end and Indian government at first. When cotton cultivation is restricted, we have been the richest cotton growing area of the whole world. The entire money was coming to Eastern India and also Bihar. I will refer to that at one time, even Patna was a very important center of cotton exports. An industry associated with textiles was a reason of that. It was diverted. Cotton was shifted to Bombay because rivers were not there, so it was easy to take the cotton to England and irrigate one. After independence, the same thing. Earlier, Europe was taking wealth from India. Now Western India is taking wealth from Eastern India. That is what is happening. He was talking that minerals are not relevant now. Certainly minerals are not relevant. But power is relevant. We have suffered during 50s or 60s and 70s. At one time felt that West Bengal had the largest installed capacity
of 500 megawatts when West India had only 300 megawatts. We were around about 200 megawatts. Now what is the position? Power has been sanctioned in the western part of India. It is now 17,000 megawatts. We are hovering, both Bengal, us and Odisha are hovering around 3,500 or so. We are around only 1,500 megawatts. Even if DVC is included, then around 300 megawatts. And how can they not take this? That's the basic thing. And possibly I feel that in order to hide the basic issue of the financial flow, these unnecessary issues of these institutional factors are fixed, so that our mind get absorbed in these matters. We keep on fighting among ourselves and do not take the central issue. Until the flow of finance is directed towards. I mean, Bihar is for 7 drains are there from Bihar itself. It is not that resources are not there in this state, but all resources are flowing out. I mean, we are the most consuming state. All goods come from outside, we buy, everything goes. Bank's money deposited here, bank's money goes outside. Government of India providing loan to India. And culture and all. What is culture? Culture is a changing form. If you become rich, your culture becomes rich. At one time, Europe was poor region. Nobody was hearing them. Now, they are rich, everybody is getting them. If East becomes rich, everybody will hear. So it is a secondary. Fundamental issue is finance. And finance should be discussed. Historically, finance has been flowing here, so we are rich. Economics to grow the house and on the financial and economic aspect of the problem, next we have to speak.
I would like to address Walter's optimism. I would like to hear if you can, of course, Ireland's opinion about that as well. But Walter's optimism also is that one of the glaring contradictions, because there is so much very interesting research done by Bihar on Bihar, but it's only 38% of the population that can read or write. If you look at the statistics for female literacy, it's sometimes worse. I believe that it's about 20 or 30% of the girls that even go to school. I don't need to quote the statistics, but that's so much work on it. But the point I want to raise, and not that I don't have an answer to it, but what do you mean when you say we the people of Bihar? The education itself, the statistic is not a crucial part, but it seems such a symbol for me. If only 40% of the people get to read and write, how can you then speak about we the people? Who is we the people? Thank you.
So could I ask you that as well? I'd like to thank Aaron for kind of grand tour de force of the Nisa Damoli, University of Sussex. I'd like to thank Aaron for that kind of grand tour de force of the history and politics of Bihar. I feel that there are some methodological problems in the way in which you think the law of history of Bihar is definitely not a problem. That's an issue. But overall, when I was looking at your paper, both you and Walter, both of you seem to have an optimism about the way in which contemporary resistance movements point towards more, ultimately to a more equitable sharing resources. And you seem to hint that the violence in Bihar today is a result of the challenge to things that Ireland and others did not address. And one was women, and the other is Muslims. And it seems to me that a lot of the violence in contemporary Bihar is directed against both women and Muslims. And I wonder how your analysis of violence being a symptom of the challenge posed to existing authoritarian structures would address the violence that is directed specifically against women and against Muslims. Thank you.
I'd like to take a cue from what's been said just now by both Arjun and Janita, choosing the words specifically with regard to the Muslim question, which seem to be completely ignored by maybe say Arvind, I heard part of it. The way in which Walter draws the continuity between the times of glory that the national movement and the kind of times of despair that we inhabit, but we try to turn into hope, are not really sort of continuous worlds. There are lots of discontinuities and the junctures in between. And just saying that, even during the period of freedom struggle, there was a lot of unfreedom, and there is a lot of unfreedom in our sort of freedom era, doesn't really sort of address the question of difference as to what kind of difference has it made in terms of independence. Independence may not be a magical date or a magical dateline, but it does mean something in terms of political relationship. And if we and Arvind and others have shown pretty acutely as to what kind of changes have come about in post-independence Bihar. People who hold power and exercise dominance are not exactly the same people. They may seemingly sort of adopt similar methods, but they have very different meanings. And it is these kinds of junctures which seem to be shaded away in Walter's presentation, which I'm trying to wonder why, because Walter himself has done a lot of work to show that the principal changes that have been imposed are. I mean, I'm just reminded of some of his own studies on election as a performative right. So something which is just be rather insignificant in the culture. Being an anthropologist, I'm more interested in culture. The whole question about the outflow of finance has been spoken about since the era of the other minority, and it hasn't really told us why a particular point would have particular significance. The point that I would like Arvind to sort of elaborate upon, if he can, is what exactly does it mean for Bihar to be in the world? In other words, how does Bihar figure in the world, specifically in terms of culture? Why I ask this is because, as he pointed out, the identity of the Bihari is manifested in terms of external relations, in terms of relations with others, non-Biharis, or perhaps non-Muslims. But the point is that there has for a long time been a certain notion of a Bihari. What would that constitute form? And how, if at all, has it been fluid in terms of thinking contours? Or are there constant features of that Bihari identity? To allude one back, the general is not there to respond to the statement of the problem.
you have occasion to come to the and engage in different sessions different times. May the permission of the house ask concerning and then wanted to respond. On the question of resources, I think I was misunderstood. It's the point I was making was it is not that the natural endowment is not, but the natural endowment has a certain value. It does not matter if they go to the full of diamonds, the total diamonds, some value in the market, and they are extracted, and that they are useful for some purpose of the other industries. The point is we have not only that the natural resources are there, but the fact is the value of those resources is only because alternative minerals, alternative uses, or alternative technologies are coming in to restate. Take aluminum. Today it is far cheaper to recycle aluminum than trying to from oxides. Because the smelting of aluminum is an extremely energy intensive process. Hence, you find that the whole aluminum factory is at the point of closure. The private sector company, or international company, is at the point of closure. And even the Nalco, the Organised, is just about going around. There is enough aluminum in the country as a whole today for a 3D cycle over and over again. And this is a technological leap which has taken place with this human sound terms. It is not that our copper is not the best quality copper in the world. Go quickly. There is reports analytically about it. Why? When there is so much more available, it should not be able to travel with the master. Nevertheless, with the technology, with technological scope of trading, that will really be the last for a retail contract as an asked for one from 1960 onwards, and when the sector has denied good reason, I think. The Bihari ladies have complained about sector negligence, I think, the regulation was there, which in this case is correct. But so it's a question of the endowment of natural resources and its use value and much more.
What does this mean to the people who inscribed this Constitution? It means a great deal. When I move about the constituencies that I've moved about now since 1980, unfortunately I'm not going to be here for the next election, but I've seen and I've done it, and I'm going to be writing about this election. But the point, it seems to me, Arnon, and it's a general point that I think isn't made, is that the voice of the people is heard. I'm sorry. I know all about boot staff training. Again, I've seen it. I know what happens. I know what Arvind wrote about Sangyal. All of those things are true. Please tell me that the voice of the people was not heard in 1996 in the state of Bihar when the government in power was run by one of the most important political actors in India since 1947, who was the former chief minister of this state, whose control of 48 seats moved to 22 seats. If that doesn't reflect the voice of the people, then I don't understand anything about electoral politics. Because I am told again and again and again and again that the administration that is in power manipulates the election, because I've talked to many returning officers, I've attended counting places. Of course these things happen. I'm not saying these things don't happen. They do happen. But say that to Lalu Prasad Yadav, say that to Jayalalitha, and say that to Narasimha Rao, and then ask the question, is the voice of the people heard? I'm convinced it is. The other, there was one other point that I wanted to make very, very briefly that was raised. Let me say that all of the questions that have been raised in the responses I found, the issue I found extremely sensitive reactions to, as I had this whole goes to the point, and he made the Muslim point about women Muslims is certainly well taken, and you can't deal with every category. Don't misunderstand. I make a great deal of effort to talk about every percent of the people. The issue both of men and the women and the Muslims that Adnan talked about, and that were involved in the movement that I'm talking about in the 1930s, and Adnan. But when I'm in the Mufakkah doing watching an election, and the question of the issue is raised, whether it's by one political group or another, and it's no secret in this room that any other groups that have invoked Shahjahan most often, probably with more justification than all the others who invoked him. But the point of the matter is that it is these people involve everybody. And I talk about the citizens of India who died in Bihar. Of my first visit to Bihar, I spent a couple hours with Shri Babu, and he wants me to make comparisons, and he knows that as a historian who is also an American, speaking in the city of Patna, I'm not going to elaborate too finely the point. Okay? But let me it comes partly to the issue I raised. I'm not suggesting that Sri Babu had all the answers. I'm not suggesting that Sri Babu didn't make mistakes. I would suggest for a moment that Sri Babu was not fundamentally interested in the well-being of some of his caste fellows. I wouldn't suggest any of those things. He was certainly as interested in that as the current incumbent husband is. Okay? Now, I can elaborate. Sri Babu was somebody who read books. Okay? I've not met many politicians in India or America who read books. Sri Babu did. If you want to get another name who did, Birchan Patel read books. I have not met Lalu Prasad Yadav. So I will conclude my remark by saying I don't know whether he reads books. He reads people. I appreciate the point, and I appreciate it 100%. I have said that he is probably the most effective populist politician since 1947 in this country. I have an essay in a current issue, recent issue of the EPW, in which I said exactly that. There's no question. He reads people. But governing, if I may make a concluding remark, involves more than reading people. You have to think about what the people need and want in the longer term. It is the distinction between being a remarkably successful politician on the one hand, and the elaborate complexities of governance on the other. Thank you very much. What occurs to my mind, and many people have referred to it, that is one thing, it is finance is not coming, or the finance is going out from Bihar. The only reason is corruption. I will just give one example about financing. Well, fixed deposit ratio is very low. But people are not going to the bank. And whatever finance is being given, what is the fate of that finance? And in what way it is being done? One finance was done in the name of Bamboo Prasad, son of Eucalyptus Prasad. Can you imagine that it can happen in any civilized states? But there is corruption in other states. Why is it that only Bihar is fetching the quagmire of everything? The only reason is that whatever name you may give to corruption, whether it is Suvidha Shulk or it is farm grazing or it is a seed money, whatever. For example, antigen is essential for activating your body. But if you inhale too much of antigen, the body becomes dysfunctional. Similar is the case with Bihar. Because the whole system has become dysfunctional only because of corruption. I think other factors are subsidiary. This is the most important factor that of
Thank you, Sudhakar. But the lunch is everywhere. So that is one problem where we cannot possibly continue. We'll see next session if we can accommodate something about it. I'm very thankful to all the participants for making this session very congenial and very informative. And thanks to Walter and to Arvind and Professor Sachidanand on whom we are.
It goes there on, the elements of political, economic, social movements of Bihar. And one, that which we will hear first, is a direct, straightforward reaction to the type of behavior which is generally said to be characteristic of the Bihar. While the other paper is, well, of course, much more theoretical, to ends of the chain of the chain of knowledge, like it is here. So let's begin by the beginning, and that means with the Manoj Nath.
Thank you. I would hardly call this a paper. I think it's more in the nature of an extended personal remark. And the validation of it will be found in what has gone before and what is going to come in future sessions. So what I do is a small paper, I'll read it out and then add some concluding remarks. A Bihari is apt to suffer from low self-esteem. Unquestioningly and for so long has he submitted to and tried to live by the image of him created by media and folklore that often his authentic self is masked or lies dormant. Just as the Punjabi believe to be pushy and overbearing, and Tamil wily and unctuous, the popular image of the Bihari, reinforced by goods, is that of an affable, hopeful person, full of innate talent and resourcefulness, but somehow good only as a help or indented lay. Generous, gullible, and a bit of a fool, he is not a rash interloper in a world determined to succeed at any cost. A Bhojpuri saying maintains that the wife of the weak is fair game for mild flirtations by women. So a Bihari is the standard butter joke and ridicule order, and no offense meant to mind. And yet, can this popular image be related to the facts of biology? A Bihari can hold on to his own with most inhabitants from the other states. In intelligence, in drive, in perseverance, and other attributes, he is more likely to die in the day than not. This poverty cannot, for that matter, be defined in terms of the efficiency of resources of the state. Bihar is a green, luxuriant, poor state, where everything of value is abundant and bountiful. It ensures farming operations in Punjab, while labor is in short supply at home. It provides the risk for formidable academic competition in institutions of Delhi, while the state could have done well to retain Rajasthan to lend a semblance of life in morbid and morbid academic institutions here. In fact, Bihar is a classical poor. She underwrites the prosperity of the richer states by conniving at his own exploitation.
The state has done slowly while the rest have flight. Mutely and uncomprehendingly, it has watched the others march while it has fallen to a tiny bar. The fabric of space-time is meant not only temporally, but also in terms of the attitudes and mental makeup of it. A state which set up the first steel plant in the country is, in terms of industrial development, at the bottom of the heap. A state where the public library movement could be said to be highly developed way back in the 30s and 40s, has an abysmally and unconscionably large population of illiterates. Its administration, which was a model of efficiency in the 50s, is groaning under various strains. And yet, it is business for usual for a Bihar. His complaints are fraught with failure to react would be incredible if it were not true. A Bihari would be faint to accept facts as exploitation, because no one is born a Bihari, he becomes a Bihari. A Bihari exists only because of a certain instinctive sense of discrimination. He is designated in himself. He is encouraged to live by the image of himself, so that the stark contradiction of his faith does not become apparent to him, because then he may actually disturb himself and do something about it. It is true that Bihar has been fairly well represented in central government for quite long, but while other states enjoyed the substance of the national resources, Bihar was forced to make do with the shadow of it. While Bihar remains satisfied with the tokens and symbols that lucre went the other way, the Bihar is supposed to be neat and gentle. Therefore, we should not clamor and demand his share like those other difficult states. Bihar was in the forefront of the independence movement in the shape of the KP movement which started yet another innovative political experiment. But it is the job of the Bihari political activists and ideologues. What is then becoming of him is to demand a greater share of the resources that have to be diverted elsewhere to stem the appeal of terrorism and secessionism. Bihar can be taken for granted, but not the others. There is lawlessness, there is thorough utilization of resources, so how can investments be made? It is a different matter that funds have been sunk in direct proportion to increase in anarchy and subversion in other places. Bihar has such a glorious past of asceticism and other worldliness. Therefore, for a Bihari to crave for a better standard of life would be a denial of the past. So we must contemplate his name. Hark back to the time of Buddha and Ashoka and Mahavir or Percy. In any case, no further than the 50s, it is a remark and the kind of treatment that you get in Bihari, in any gathering, in any seminar, in any symposium, you start with the handicap of death. Once people know that you are a Bihari, then it's almost as if Bihar was tainted with a prior, almost a priori culpability. Not that the issues of criminalization, the issues of corruption, they will talk about it later. But if we look at the national scene, I think these are facts of life which one must learn to live about. And whether Bihar is the bottom or whether Bihar deserves the place in the terminology is a question about which we can have conflicting views. But just as the practice of Bihar or the defenders, I think the difference is largely mental, what you think about Bihar. And that is precisely the problem. Whenever one talks about Bihar, you start with a historical legacy. You start with a certain fixed attitudes, certain idiocy, which is difficult to in fact, it was very flattering to hear some spirited defense of Bihar earlier on in the session. In fact, Bihari but feel great encouragement. But the point to be taken note is that Bihar things are bad. And the various facts, the various cliched things that I have said about Bihar, about the historical legacy, about the size of population, about the size of the country, I think they could be made about the country in general, about India in general, whatever it is. So Bihar stands in relation to India as India stands in relation to the world. Therefore, the problem that Bihar is facing today and how it is solved is going to be some kind of a pointer to how the rest of the country fares. That is a question which must not be lost sight of. And all those frozen generalities which we are talking about, all those about ancient history, about the paradox about the staging. think they have pursued the problem in India. And Bihar that way, the experiment in Bihar is going to be provide the solution on a national scale. And just one bit of information, why I said about this film of destination. Recently, discussion for Bharte comes quite a lot of prominence, and it was being discussed in the present Indian Council. And in response to the repeated demands for extra induction of paramilitary forces, what we got was, in the successive presentations by the DGCRP, the reference to Punjab, the reference to Jammu Kashmir, the reference to North East, why it was not possible to induct more than 3 or 4 companies to Bihar. So, once it is agreed that Bihar has a problem, which is endemic and cannot be surmounted with every induction of force. So this kind of thing it hurts to be told that forces cannot be relocated from Punjab or Jammu Kashmir or even North East. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it would be better if we had both papers in succession, so that the discussion will go on both at the same time. So that is special.
In fact, while understanding the basis of the development in Bihar, in the past, rightly, the attention has been on the nature of accumulation. And since a bit like Bihar, in addition, it has been rightly pointed out that various economic contradictions developed in terms of high rent barriers, in terms of semi-feudal mode of production, etc., etc. These, no doubt, are very important while understanding the deficit of development. But in this case, actually, I have been trying to understand 2 institutions of utmost importance. These are the caste as an institution and corruption or the institutionalized corruption that have taken place in Bihar. My position is that in a state where the pace of capital accumulation is very slow and where there is an extreme socio-economic hierarchy, the mobility of an individual does not take place along economic lines. As a result, the mobility of an individual takes place along the social and political axis. In a structure of dominance and hierarchy, it is quite possible that caste contradictions may be created, and these caste contradictions may become very active in the arena of politics, in the arena of a state, thereby restraining the autonomy of the state to play the role of development on the one hand. On the other hand, these caste contradictions have also, in order to retain the structure of dominance, led to the transfer of surplus to a class, to a caste, or to a group who are merely interested in retaining the structure of dominance and are not interested in making capital accumulation. Therefore, the result has been that there has been the long-term issue of capital accumulation could not be seriously taken, and the caste contradiction could be resolved in the arena of the state simply over the distributive share of the state domestic product. Similarly, in the case of corruption, my submission is that in a society where there is an extreme socio-economic inequality, the corruption flourishes. And when these social and political mobilizations are taking place, it is quite likely that corruption may enter into the arena of the state.
corruption may enter through the route of politics. Although there may exist the administrative corruption, that is quite rampant everywhere, that may be there. But corruption may enter through the arena of politics, and these then further restrict the autonomy of the state. The failure of the institution, the failure of the state PSC may result as a result of this corruption. And as we know that corruption, by diverting the productive resources into unproductive channels, may further distort the path of capital accumulation. So it is for this reason that we have been seeing in this state the degeneration of capital accumulation into the amassing of the wealth. Furthermore, it is because of this that the class war also has sort of degenerated into the pure class war. So the basis of underdevelopment are to be understood in terms of these two institutions of this state, which are probably specific in a sense that it holds to extreme degree in this state. And these have taken away the autonomy of the state. First of all, I will briefly contradiction between A1 and B1 set. I will later come to the nature of the contradictions and what are the results of these contradictions. If, first of all, we look at the caste contradictions between the set A and the set B and C, but minus the subset B1 and C. The result of this caste contradiction is that set A1 or set A is basically interested to maintain the structure of dominance. Since by maintaining the structure of dominance, they find that they can not only ensure the regular supply of labor, just by maintaining the social hierarchy, they will be able to not only maintain the regular supply of labor, but they will also be able to transfer the surplus of labor more easily. They will also be able to intensify the surplus of labor from the category B and C if this caste hierarchy or the social hierarchy is maintained. Moreover, it is also in the interest of the state to maintain the caste hierarchy because then they can get the advantages of getting the job, of cornering the benefits of the government programs of the party. The point is that this set A has always been interested in making the social hierarchy, in creating the social hierarchy and in exerting the dominance. Because then it is in their interest to take the maximum out of the different sets. B2, B3, B4 and C2, C3, C4. They can appropriate the surplus more intensively and also appropriate the benefits from the government jobs and from the government programs in the policy. It is this caste contradiction that assumes importance, say in the 50s and 60s, where the land was preferred by the set A because land was traditionally the source of maintaining the dominance and hierarchy. And land not only provided them the rent and various other forms of surplus appropriation, but land with this set A also provided them the social power, the social status. That also provided them the security. And all these mean that the implicit return on land was very high. As a result, land was preferred rather than the capital. And this, it was in the interest of the set A to prefer the land, to access, to show the keen preference to land, not go to alter the structure in the way that the political. And even after this amount of actual expenditure, the result of these irrigating programs is nil, other than the fact that the employees
we were given exams, we were paid like that. There was no productive use to which these irrigation projects could be put in out. For example, the target say the target of irrigating the land was 6 lakh for 7 hectares. For 7 lakh hectares, whereas the actual irrigation capacity was hardly 29,000 hectares. So the point is that when corruption is on such a large scale, one has to see qualitatively distinguish the nature of corruption. In what sense, under what circumstances corruption comes in, and how corruption really drains the resources and becomes the basis of underdevelopment of the state. But there is one point which is very interesting. See, from the point of view of accumulation, corruption since diverts the resources from productive channels is anti-accumulation. Corruption is not good for accumulation. But the redistributive effect of corruption is highly ambiguous. Because, see, there is one government employee who will benefit out of using the corrupt practices. But he may also lose when he has to pay bribe at some another point. Now, irrespective of the fact that he is a net gainer or a net loser, both of them are going to be because in the end, they do not know that evidence that they are going to be a net loser. And in this process, whether they are the net gainer or the net loser, everyone seems to favor corruption. And corruption becomes
discuss together both papers. The first paper has given us sort of overview of the Bihar has been so long considered to be meek, little sign, pathetic, and so on. And how does one reconcile his supposed failure with that? With the fact that in history, of course, the Biharis have shown that they had a remarkable capacity to resist oppression, to fight their oppressors. I have in mind at the moment a report or a series of reports that were sent by the district collectors of the former Shahabad district to the India Company at the end of the 18th century. Reports by collectors saying that the territory of that area was extraordinarily pugnacious and that it was almost impossible for the revenue staff to collect the money from the land sections of the society, and even from the rich peasantry. So there are, of course, many other things.
And yet, why is it that you may create a area, Sherman, where these are very good habits. It intrigues me. Unless, of course, what I want is saying all of this in pure idealism. In this case, the other paper was mentioned on the striking paper, and I was very struck by his analysis of political economy and class and corruption. I agree almost entirely about it. I only wish he had, in talking about the categories of primitive accumulation, he had focused a little more on the role of the state in terms of primitive accumulation. The state has been seen as a vehicle of accumulation of secondary capital. But in Bihar, the state as a mode, as an agent of primitive accumulation has existed. Certainly in the power and secular period, the state provided that opportunity for primitive accumulation because there is no other way of describing such extortionate rent extraction. And subsequently too,
if we are talking of corruption as a phenomenon relating to primitive population, then control over the state as the principal agent of primitive population becomes much more important. Which also explains the premium which is put on government jobs in Bihar. Since there are other forms of accumulation are relatively restricted, the access to government jobs or government positions or to government through elections is so much more important. And in this context, the fact that water resource management corruption that he talks of, if only 82.11 crores was spent on actual work against the establishment expenditure of 240.64 crores, it is not at all strange in my view. Because the accumulation is really taking place through access to the government job rather than the job itself. So the two levels of primitive accumulation also need to be talked about. And that would add a little more depth to an already very active concept.
Just your mathematics. We say that total divided estimate of these projects were put at rupees 3241.88 crores. And actual expenditure as of 31st March was 1443.45 crores. It means there was a deficit of 1800 crores during that period. So, availability of adequate funds was a clear indication that this fund was not available in time. Next it says that between 91-92 and 85-96, the expenditure on work was only rupees 82.11 crores, whereas the expenditure on establishment 240.6 crores, totaling 302.75 crores. So there is something which is missing here. There is no correlation between actual expenditure of 1443.45 crores for work. At one point it says like this, whereas it says 302.75 crores on actual work. So you will find that the actual cause of non-utilization of the fund is non-availability of funds. Why this fund was not made available for work has to be thought
of our country. I mean, I think we are talking of two Bihars. These are not one and the same. So, we have to form an image about Bihar. Firstly, in terms of the ruling classes and castes or dominating classes and castes, their characteristics, and again, about we have to make an image of Biharis in the completion of the irrigation project. And we think that it is not only due to corruption. Corruption was earlier also, but it has of course increased. But the major cause is the poor planning, and in all such activities, many factors are involved, like anger, withdrawal, the public cooperation. Recently, the environmental issue paper. I'm sorry to put it this way, because this was basically, someone mentioned emotion, someone mentioned irony. I think they're answering the question for me. It was in the nature of an anguished kind of a very, in the nature of thinking aloud. And the very process that has started, so many people asking the questions, so many people questioning the stereotypes of images, so many people differing from what is my entirely personal perception. I think the limited purpose will have been served. So when I said that the Bihari is designated, I meant precisely that. The gentleman talked about the perception of Bihari changing every 20 kilometers. So Bihari is a basically mental construct. It is an artificial entity construct.
The growth rate of agricultural output in Bihar in the period 1992-95 over 62-65 at 0.99%, is the lowest among all the states as compared to on the average of 2.7.
After which we will go on to the next part.
Can you really about corruption in the term that is being proposed in terms of the first class category?
When corruption becomes such a pervasive problem, could we not give corruption an independent role to understand the agenda? Finally, I use the term corruption because I was convinced that in the context of Bihar, I thought that it does take away much of the resources which could have been used otherwise for the purpose. So it does probably provide us an independent external. But I think you are certainly right that in terms of change pattern of the social relationships, the effort to understand it must be. And then growth is one attribute